Call this meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
I'm here.
Councilmember Grimes.
Here.
Councilmember Mail.
Here.
Councilmember Stewart. Here. Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
All right, before we get into budget work session, I just want to make one observation. We have, on Monday night, we have scheduled at the end of the meeting for a good chunk of time, budget reconciliation. And it's my hope, it's my hope that you agree with me in this hope, that we can accomplish budget reconciliation on Monday night and not have to have budget reconciliation on Thursday night next week. So just keep that in mind as we're going through tonight and Monday night, and hopefully that can be the case. So we'll get going with first recreation.
All right. Just wanted to make a note. We have three areas to cover this evening, I guess, plus speed camera. All of them have very standard budget proposals, very little change, and so I'm happy about that, I guess. And we'll jump right into recreation with Greg Clark, and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Clark, and I'll be presenting the Recreation Department budget. As you can see before you, recreation programs continue to do well serving city residents. There is significant increase in revenues and expenditures from the present fiscal year going into FY16, which I will explain in a moment. Department FTEs are unchanged, and there are no upcoming capital projects. As I mentioned, the department's FY16 budget is experiencing an increase. $47,000 of the increase is directly related to personnel-related costs, which include an increase in the minimum wage for part-time staff and the implementation of a compensation study. $53,000 of the increase represents contracts for instructors. The way that our current contracts are structured for a few instructors are we allow the instructors to take registration for their own programs and services, meaning that those programs and services are not realized through our ActiveNet program. In turn, we receive a percentage, right now is on average 30% in revenue from that contractor. The downside of that is that the department does not get to realize the actual number of people served through those programs. In addition, we don't realize that our actual expenses for the department, nor the actual revenue that the department will be receiving as a result of the contractor taking his or own registration. The resulting revenue that directly relates to that $53,000 in additional expense is the department would receive $81,000 in revenue if we were taking the registrations ourselves. So we would pay out $53,000 to the contractors, and we receive $81,000 in revenue. For example, we have taught class instructors, and currently those expenses are about $28,000, and we would receive approximately $40,000 in revenue from those classes. We have classes, dog class instructors. Those expenses are about $15,000, and we would receive approximately $26,000 in revenue if we were taking the registrations ourselves. We also have fitness and exercise contractors, which the expenses are about $9,000, and we would receive about $15,000 in revenue if we were taking those registrations in ourselves. Currently, instead of the $81,000, the department is only realizing about $34,000 of that revenue because of the 30%. In total, the department projected programming revenue is expected to be $560,000 in this fiscal year, compared to projected of $478,000 in FY15, which is an increase of 17%. Senior programs are experiencing tremendous growth in the recreation as well. This fiscal year, we were able to provide active programming for seniors at the Tacoma Park, New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center 2 days a week from 12 to 2. Senior classes at the community center in this building and at the recreation center are mostly full, and most of those programs have a waiting list. Providing developmental opportunities for teens continues to be a focus of our department, too. This budget allows for continuation of a college expo in which 9 teens were accepted into multiple colleges, and one young person actually received a full scholarship as a result of our trip that we had this past March. This budget would also allow us to continue our Career Week, Spring Break Camp, partnerships with groups like the Youth Collaborative, and also continue developmental classes and programs for young people, which include costume design, photography, SAT prep, and charm school. In keeping with our youth development theme, the department provided grants and other financial opportunities, financial support, I should say, for various stakeholders. This budget continues that support for the Lunch and Learn program, Man Up, and Tacoma Plays. I've also set aside approximately $20,000, which is currently used for the Montgomery County ACES program to support city participants in that program. And I will actually seek council direction in what to do with that $20,000, whether we want to continue at ACES or use that money for
And what is
additional
ACES?
youth development opportunities.
What is ACES?
ACES program is Achieving Collegiate Excellence and Success, which is a collaborative program that's run out of Montgomery College and partners with the high schools to create a seamless pathway from high school to colleges for underserved or unrepresented groups in colleges.
So they provide mentoring within the high school, and
Right. And you're saying the money's in here, but do we want to continue with that program or something else?
Yes.
And give us reasons why we wouldn't continue with the existing.
Oh, no, I am totally satisfied, and I think the money is used right currently in a worthwhile cause. So I am in support of continuing the support of ACES program. I mean, I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to voice your opinion on
But
what to
Greg,
do with those
wasn't there an
funds.
issue about us even getting some of the information back from them on?
Yeah, well, currently, I've been in communication with ACES recently, but we have yet to receive the information that's needed to administer the funds for the program. I was just able to schedule a meeting actually today with the ACES program leader sometime next week. So there was a
administrative
concern,
issue.
some concern about whether or not we were going to be able to use the funds, just because there was a lack of communication throughout the program and how to administer the
I think I can help you to
funds.
resolve that if you need some assistance.
Yes, appreciate it.
How many high school students participate?
How many high school students?
Yeah,
Well,
in this-
the high school students
this
that participate
20 grand.
aren't just City of Tacoma Park residents, but there are a lot of young people that the program supports. But the city, residents of the city that the program supports, we estimate between 13 and 20 young people that we'll be able to support with those funds.
And what is the $5,000 program assistance for Man Up? What does that go towards?
The program assistance for Man Up is used for transportation, program supplies. They pay contractors to come in and provide services for food to feed the young people. So they have the liberty to use the $5,000 at their leisure, as long as they provide the proper documentation and receipts and things of that nature.
But they've also asked for additional funds, have they not?
Yes,
Man
that's,
Up.
that's my understanding, yes.
Direct grant funds
Yeah,
from the
direct
county,
grant.
yes.
Another initiative is the return of our summer youth employment program, which we're excited about. This year, the program expanded from 6 to 8 weeks. We currently have 7 business partners, which will be able to provide job experiences, meaningful job experiences for 8 young people. And just a little note that the Recreation Department will only be funding 5 of those young people. So there'll be 3 jobs that will be paid for by the business, and one of those opportunities is by our own internship through our police department. Examples of jobs for this year include customer service in an office setting. We're partnering with a barbershop to provide an opportunity. Camp counselor, office work for a building material supplier, stock clerk, as I mentioned, the police intern, and we're excited because we're able to provide 2 green jobs through the Department of Natural Resources as a part of this program as well.
What about Washington Adventist Hospital? Are they participating in the program?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Washington Adventist Hospital?
Washington Adventist, yes, we
The
received.
hospital is, or the university?
The
The
university.
university is.
So the hospital
But not the
isn't
hospital.
taking any kids on?
No,
or-
I haven't received an application from the hospital.
Okay.
New this summer is our Teen Twilight Sports Program. This program is a sports program for teens that will take place at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center twice per week. One of the days' focus will be basketball. The other focus will be on futsal. This program, we're partnering with the Tacoma Park Police Department to foster positive relationships between the city's youth and the city's police. Excuse me. Lastly, I would like to give you an update on the programming study that will take place at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center. Staff and I have met with the contractor and have developed several vehicles to receive community input into this process. And they will begin on May 7th with a 15-day online survey that will be hosted on the city's website. In addition, there will be 2 town hall forums, in-person forums that will take place the last week of May to receive additional community input. More information and advertisement of all of these will begin next week. So you'll be seeing information on the city's website and the other vehicles that we use to market and advertise and get the word out to city residents.
Did you say 2 town hall meetings?
Yes, we'll have 2 town hall meetings, and they will be evenings, 2 evening meetings. And we anticipate receiving the final report for programming the last week of June from our contractor.
And just a quick observation as you leave that page. On that page, you referred to the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center. We also refer to it as the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. Does that confuse people?
Sort of, yes.
Maybe we ought to pick one and go with it.
One is the community center,
Partly it comes
the-
with, if you're talking with Montgomery County park and planning officials versus what we talk about, and I think one of the things that may come out of some of this discussion is an appropriate name.
Right.
Be a good idea.
Some folks still refer to the facility as the Tacoma Langley Community Center, so it has
So it
several.
has a multiplicity of names.
Exactly. Lastly, our department has a host of additional programs and services that this budget supports, things that we've done in the past that we've done really well at, to include our youth leagues, which is our YES League, flag football, futsal, and t-ball leagues, youth and teen camps, special events such as our Monster Bash, Celebrate Tacoma, our Egg Hunt, movies in the park, art opportunities for youth and adults, programming and trips for our seniors, maintenance of our athletic fields, and last but not least, training and development for our career and part-time staff.
Okay, I've got a couple of things. questions or observations that I came up with as I was reading through the budget pages, and I can refer to them by page as we go through. I think I can mostly just make the observation. I wanted to point out that on page 97, in the division purpose, there's the language about the county operating payment for the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. Covers only about 56% of the expenses not covered by user fees, and that the Tacoma Park taxpayers subsidize county operations at a cost of about $70,000 annually. That was one of the highlights of the city's budget testimony at the county council. And so I think.
As if it helped us today.
Yeah, well, you know, we got to point these things out. Also, on the bottom of that page where it's looking at the measures, some of the memberships are down or projected to be down. Any sense of why that is, or anything that's going to change?
Well, they're projected to be down because we actually got we have real numbers, and we weren't using real numbers in the past, and we were able to narrow it down and really go through and count and look at what we've done in the past, and we realized that some of those numbers were duplicating folks. So we got this down to actual real numbers.
So the FY14 aren't necessarily real numbers?
That's correct.
Okay. Page 100, on the performance and workload measures. I just kind of felt like, as I looked at it, that it was mixing things a little bit. All of everything except the last one are kind of measures of participants, and the last one is staff participation in local festivals and special events. So it was kind of mixing what I kind of thought of as two different categories.
Yeah, that bullet, and it comes out of history, and we wanted to capture the number of staff that we actually utilize for some of our festivals and special events. So we thought it was a good idea to capture that number. And I want to say it might have gone on prior to, in prior years as well, so prior to FY14. You know, one of the things I believe that we discussed with Suzanne in our management team meetings was reworking our performance, our workload and performance measures. And I would like to rework a lot of our performance measures, but because of historical reasons, you know, we have to figure out a good time to do it, and then you have and establishing a baseline, a proper baseline for some of those, and you have to show history as well. So I'm sure that's one of the things that we're going to be doing in the coming years, which is reworking all of these to make sure that they are.
I would encourage that. Page 109, the first management objective says increase customer satisfaction with before and after school care programs by receiving 75% or better rate of return for surveys. And I thought to myself, well, just because you get 75% of surveys returned doesn't mean they're going to be satisfied. They might be dissatisfied. That might drive the numbers up. So that one needs to be reworked. It's got a mix of two different things. And then on page 112, there was, let's see, the next to the last management objective talks about expanding the 55 and over program by implementing evening and weekend classes at the community center. And my reaction was, oh, do we have room to add things during the week in the evening here?
Well, right now, our seniors don't, well, we have room to add things in the senior lounge. So we do have,
okay,
yes, we
okay.
do have room in there. And we do have room on the weekends to add classes too for seniors.
Okay. And just my final observation that you don't need to say anything on, it's just on page 113, the last category there is miscellaneous, and then you point out that it includes, on page 114, it says that it includes costs for senior programming and teen programming, and I just thought that was kind of an odd place to put programming for those in miscellaneous. So if you come up with a better way to capture those, that would be helpful. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Clark, for the presentation. Glad to see things are running smoothly in the Recreation Department.
Thank you.
You mentioned the success of the senior programs and that many of them are running to full capacity. And I know that several years ago, we actually targeted seniors for recreation programs. And I just wonder if maybe it's time to start thinking about other populations that we might want to target in the same way to see if we could build the same type of success.
I agree. Paula has done a tremendous job with our senior program since she's got here. A lot of the growth that we experience have come since she's been here, and she's added, active program as well as filled this building and working on adding programs in another building. And I think that we can concentrate on another area, whether it be tots or teens or just youth in general. I think that we can apply the same effort and increase participation as well, if that's the desire of the council.
Right. I don't think we're ready to add a staff member, an additional staff member to do that, but wondering if that isn't something we'd accomplish with existing staff. It seems to make sense to me.
Okay.
And one thing that you didn't mention that I think is would be helpful, and that is providing scholarships for the staff members and contractors within the recreation programs. Have you given that any thought?
Providing, I want to make sure I understand correctly.
Allowing them to attend rec programs for free, especially
This is
the educational programs?
For the contractors, for the contracted staff and part.
Yes. Well, right now we do allow contracted staff. We give all staff the resident rate. So we do provide some sort of subsidy if they live in the city, or not. Then they receive they can get in for the resident rate. But that's something that we can take a look at if the council is interested in providing not only contracted staff but all staff a reduced rate for participation.
I would like to get a feel for how much that would cost and see if we can put that on the reconciliation budget for Thursday, or for Monday.
Well, I know there was a city TV contractor who was interested in this sort of opportunity, not exactly this one. Have you heard of demand for this from any of the rec staff or other staff? Or, I'm sorry, not staff, any of the contractors?
I do know that from time to time we have experienced staff that will come to us that want to participate in the class or have their child participate in the class or something of that nature. So it does happen. It's not as frequent as one might think, but it's something that I am interested in taking a look at and would love participating in or providing that service. Exactly. It's something when I was in park and planning, most staff and their siblings, to include contractors, receive reduced rates for participation in classes and services. However, and there isn't necessarily a dollar figure associated with it because most of our classes and programs are contracted. So it's just a reduction in revenue. So we will receive revenue for that particular class or for that child or staff participating in that class. We just won't receive the maximum amount of revenue. So it's just a reduction in revenue.
Right, so I say I think it's a pretty low price.
Yes, it's really low.
Benefit that is good for employee morale,
Yes.
at least.
Yes, and we've often received employees that would like to become members of the that would like to use the fitness equipment. And I know several of the police have asked, in the past to, work out in the fitness room. So some programs and things like that actually, especially for the fitness room, help staff stay fit and has a
Right.
health benefit and insurance benefit and all of that nature. So.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And then just one last question, back on the title page for your presentation.
Oh,
I just wanted you to confirm the rumor that that is Mayor Williams in the picture with
I can't confirm nor deny.
the whiskers. The whiskers seem to be similar.
oh, are you going to say who really it was?
It was Ashton.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
Several questions. With regard to the rec center and the fact that we don't actually own the building, who pays for the repairs? I'm not talking about day-to-day maintenance. I'm just talking about repairs to the rec center. And does that show up in our budget?
Yeah, well, no, it doesn't. It's part of our contract. Park and Planning pays for they actually do most of the major maintenance. So
Okay.
if we have something wrong with the roof, or I want to say they've come in and fixed the scoreboard in the past, lights in the ceiling, external lights. So anything major, Park and Planning, we just call them and they come and take care of it.
Oh, okay.
So we don't, the city doesn't actually pay for the major things.
With the big exception that we got in the energy efficient lighting, and
The LEDs.
it was a grant, but it was part of our money for
Yeah,
that.
that part I understood. Do you have since we distinguish between fees that residents pay as opposed to non-residents, do we track those percentages?
Yes, we actually have a standard system, cost system for our programs and services. So if a program is under a certain fee, residents, if it's under $25 or under, residents pay the $25. The non-resident may pay $35, is an additional $10. And it's a tiered system like that. It's not a percentage. If we do percentages, we'll begin to get into change.
No, what I was referring to, I'm sorry, what I was, just in terms of the participation,
Okay.
I'm trying to get a sense of how many people who we have who participate who are not residents of Tacoma Park.
Yes. We
Nothing to do with their fees, I'm just, and whether that's trending in any particular direction.
Yes, we can capture that information as long as those folks register through our registration system, and that was one of the challenges that I mentioned earlier, because the instructors taking the registration, sometimes we don't receive all of that information. But yes, we do track our resident versus non-resident participation, and in the past, we were somewhere around 50% of residents versus non-residents. I know our Winter Basketball League, which is one of our larger programs, and I want to say that's majority non-resident participation in our Winter Basketball League. I can get you actual percentages, but for the most part, for class, we were right around 50%, 48, 49%.
Well, I'm sort of trying to lead you somewhere on this, and that is that to the extent that some of our rec center or recreation programs are kind of bursting at the seams because they're oversubscribed or there's just limited amount of physical space. In other words, they're full.
Yes.
That would suggest that it might make sense, at least from a capitalistic thinking point of view only, to raise the fees higher for non-residents to increase our revenue, simply because we can. That's just the way, something to be to thought about. There may be other values that we're trying to reach that don't, that would go against that kind of thinking, and I appreciate that as well. But it just seems to me that when we're getting oversubscribed, or just physically we just don't have space to do all the things we want to do, that it might make some logical sense to increase the difference between the residential and the rate and the non-residential rate.
Okay.
Just a thought. I'd like you to think about that. With regard to art classes, here you, on page 112, expand the 55-plus program by implementing evening and weekend classes, technology, and art-based classes at the community center. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by technology and art-based classes at the community center?
Yeah, our department for the past, I want to say couple of years, have had a focus on providing or attracting more of the baby boomers and the younger generation of seniors, and adding those technology classes and other art classes and active classes is a direct attempt to attract more of the baby boomers, more of those that are of the younger age that are still interested in those type of developmental learning opportunities, and the stimulating opportunities that those classes provide.
Do we have the space?
Well, we have space in the art room. We do have space in the art room and the senior room. The art room, not as much, but we can add a class or two. But in the senior room, we do have space to add classes. And on the weekends, we have space to add classes as well.
As you and I have talked, and as you know, my concern is that the art room,
Yes.
It needs to be expanded, and I wish we had money in the budget this year to do that. Maybe use some of the adjacent space in the Rose Room, for example. But if we don't, I can appreciate why we don't. But it's something that I want us to think about, if possible. The other question I have with regard to the consultant study that's scheduled to be done by the end of June, and you're going to be having a couple town hall kind of meetings and the surveys. A little worried about getting this whole study done and having it handed to you and then, of course, us sometime in June, and we're sort of like looking at the study and seeing the data and the findings and all that. And so by the time we get a chance to look at it, the contractual obligations, scope of services will be largely done. And I'm just thinking that we don't have control, and I'm not sure that we should, over the kinds of questions, the nature of the survey that will be distributed or however it's going to be done. And so the long and short of it is trying to think if we can get the consultant to kind of give us a preliminary final report so that we have a chance here to kind of digest that and ask questions and ask the consultant, why and why not, how did you get this finding and why didn't you ask this question?
Yeah, I apologize, but all of that is included in the contract.
Okay.
So we will get an opportunity to review the contract and review the results and vet it and ask questions prior to. I just gave the bottom line dates for the completion of the contract, but all of those things are included in the contract with the vendor.
Okay. Okay, good.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The county has a program called Rec Assist, and I apologize if you've talked to us about this before, but are our residents eligible to participate? And if they participate, do they get to So it's a subsidy program. If you have a certain income level, you're able to get credits and vouchers. Do we take advantage of that, or?
Not to my knowledge. There may be residents, because I'm sure that there are Tacoma Park residents that take part in Montgomery County Recreation Programs and Services. I am not sure, but I can definitely try and contact the Montgomery County Recreation Department to find out if there are Tacoma Park residents that participate in Rec Assist. That's the name of it?
Yeah.
Rec Assist? Okay, we can definitely contact them and find out.
Thank you. To follow up on Councilmember Schultz's comment about non-resident fees, and I think this is similar to what Councilmember Grimes, I'm channeling him right now. The question I would ask is whether what the county charges for non-county resident fees for its programs, and whether we might use something like the county approach to look at our fee structure. So that's just a suggestion.
Okay.
Some residents have come and spoke to us in the past, and I have one particular constituent who's interested in the idea of more programming and more assistance for participation in programming associated with people with disabilities.
Okay.
I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the department's current offerings and whether you have any ideas on how to meet some of that need.
Well, currently, my background, prior to me coming, I was the regional manager in the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and part of my duties was the inclusion and TR program that I had staff actually manning and running. So providing opportunities for people with disabilities is near and dear to my heart. Debbie also has a background and had a similar job in park and planning, where providing opportunities for people with disabilities. We currently offer reasonable accommodations as a part of our program with 2-week notice. For if the patron notifies us within 2 weeks, then we provide a reasonable accommodation. Currently, we provided a buddy system for a couple of residents that have taken advantage of that service, meaning the resident needed an accommodation. So what we did was allow their buddy to go on the program for free, which the buddy was able to sign or provide the accommodation that was needed for that particular resident. Right now, we do not offer inclusion services, and then through our research, once you begin inclusion services, you can't stop offering inclusion services. And sometimes inclusion services is or certain services are one-on-one. They require more staff and more training and more certifications and things that are needed for the staff to provide those services. One of the things that we decided to do to provide opportunities for residents that have disabilities is we partnered, well, not partnered, but we've contracted with a group that actually comes, what day? Wednesdays here in the community center, and offers programs for persons with disabilities. This way, we're offering a service to city residents for people with disabilities, and we're not incurring the additional expenses that would come with if we did it ourselves and we had to provide that service. It is my experience that providing budget for providing such services can become quite steep. So what we've done in the past was referred those individuals, because Montgomery County offers those programs. So what we've done was referred those residents to programs in Montgomery County.
One follow-up point, which isn't really budget related, but it's rec related, and it's concerning the long-term budget. We've been talking about the pool on Maple Avenue and a long-term solution for the pool, and then we have the rec center, also owned by the county on New Hampshire Avenue. And I just don't know if we're ever going to be able to convince the county, and I can see some of the reasoning behind it, whether they say it or not, to support a piece of infrastructure that is literally right on the border of another county. I don't know if there are any other examples like that where, you know, it's sort of on the very edge of the county of Montgomery County. There is a you know, a building and infrastructure services provided like that. And so this has nothing to do, as I said, with this year, and I support the rec services we're providing in that building at cost. But if, as part of a long-term solution to keep the pool, to get a better pool, to pay for the capital improvements needed to create a freestanding or separate from the school facility at the pool that provides many services to all the residents who live on Maple Avenue as well as everybody else in the city, we would think about an arrangement that would involve the county selling the property on New Hampshire Avenue and using some of that money to help pay for the upgrade of the pool facility. I just put that on the table because I think at some point we're going to need to come up with the some long-term ideas. Who knows what ends up being the solution, but I would just put that out there. The one thing that I think would be helpful as a data point, and this is a separate issue, is just thinking about the hours that buildings are open, like this building or that rec center, or, for example, the name has just slipped my mind, but what's the rec center that's just up the hill in the park? Thank you, Hefner. Having a calculation of the number of hours per week on average that the building is opened, or the number of hours per year, and then the visits per hour, essentially, would be a standardized way. I'm thinking about the mayor's earlier points. That would be a standardized way just to understand, you know, use of facilities per hour. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'd be tempted to go to Councilmember Grimes next, but I think maybe Councilmember Mail channeled all of his questions and he doesn't have anything left.
Actually, I have.
Go ahead.
I have something to add, which it occurred to me as you were speaking. There is a precedent for a county facility right on the border. That's Montgomery College, and the county has continued to invest very heavily in that facility, including recreation in the form of the what do they call it? The arts and entertainment, the auditorium building. I forget what it's called. I actually don't have a budget question for you. I have a different request. I see you've brought quite a number of your staff with you. I know most, but not a couple of them by name, by face to name at least. Would you please introduce your staff along with their functions?
Yes, of course we have. I'll start with Debbie Huffman, who's our Assistant Recreation Director. Right next to her is John Webster, who's our Athletic Fields and Facilities. Right behind Debbie is Licia Munford, does our teens. Right behind Licia is Paula Lisowski, who does our seniors. Next to Paula is Lou McAllister, classes and programs. Back to the back, next to the wall is Jarrell Cotman at the rec center. And right here, raising his hand, is Michael Curlin, who does our before and after care programs.
Great, thanks.
All right.
I'm sorry, what was his capacity?
Michael Curlin, he before and after care camps,
Okay,
all
all
of
right.
that. Yeah.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for all the work the rec department does, and for a very successful indoor basketball season this year. The girls were very happy that their time got switched to the morning, so they appreciated that. I just wanted to say thank you, and also I think last year at one point you also had given us a ward breakdown by participation. Not urgent, but I thought that was very useful in thinking about who's using the rec department.
Right.
And I think it also goes to, as Councilmember Siemens mentioned, thinking about are there other populations we can do more outreach to.
Sure.
And that also, I was also thinking, given the popularity of the 55-plus programs, whether or not you've thought about any intergenerational programs to have, you know, some of the seniors who are enjoying our rec programs interact with some of the younger people in our community.
Okay. Well, I can actually send you out the ward participation data once we get back, so I can send that out to you shortly. As far as intergenerational programs, it's something that I would like to do. We haven't implemented any at this time, but it's something that we can definitely begin to think about and find a way to make sure that we have some of those programs.
And when you have the information regarding the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center study, if you could actually email it to us,
Yes,
that
yes.
would be awesome.
Yes,
because, as
I'll-
you know, there are residents who are very interested in participating.
Yes, I'll email it out to everyone, the schedule, and we're also planning to put something on the website, do a page on the website that's dedicated to it with all of the information.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
In case anyone doesn't know about it, not a rec department program, but there is the intergenerational games night at Victory
Yes,
Tower.
Victory Towers, yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to start off and say thank you for the presentation. Regarding the New Hampshire Avenue facility, I don't think we'll ever be able to rebuild or redevelop that building into something that would be a place where we can offer the level of services that we want in a rec department. I think the site's too small. I think that we need to consider other alternatives on New Hampshire Avenue. Maybe it's a land swap or something with one of the other owners. That's my first point, but I would like to have you elaborate on the relationships with like Man Up, the Youth Collaborative, and the Summer Jobs Program. Does the Summer Jobs Program, because, you know, Mr. Kinner started that program with you. Are you taking it over now? Are you leading it? Is someone else on staff helping you with it? How does it work?
Yes. Well, first, I'm going to address your first point with the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center study. Our planning department, Sarah Daines' staff, is running a simultaneous contracts, and their portion of their contract is to take a look at other options along New Hampshire Avenue that we may be able to house,
Right.
A recreation center or get those same type of services from. So that contract is ongoing as well.
And I would like to see, I mean, if I can say, I'd like to see a mixed-use project, something with a rec department or a rec facility, maybe some housing on it, retail. I mean, I just think there are so many creative ways to fix this problem. I mean, you guys need, like you said at one meeting, you need 50,000 square feet. I don't think we're ever going to see 50,000 square feet on that current site.
Right.
So, but, I mean, there are options. I think we should pursue them. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
As far as the relationships with the partnering groups, I think that we have a pretty good relationship with our partnering groups, especially with Man Up. I believe they've been here 6 or 7 years. I've dealt with them a lot. I've delegated a lot of those assignments right now to Alicia, who's our team manager, because she directly deals with teams, and the services that they provide deal with our young people. Alicia also participates, and we also participate on the Youth Collaborative to attend those meetings and provide input and assistance where needed. So I think we have a very good relationship with those groups, and I'm looking forward to it continuing. I think that together we can all, combine, where we may have the space and they may have a certain portion, and someone else that provides youth services, another stakeholder may have something else that they can provide, that we can provide the space, and Man Up can provide the kids, and someone else can provide the training. I mean, it's all helping Tacoma Park young people, and I think that's the goal. As far as the Summer Jobs Program, yes, it's something that Brian was tasked, and I was a part of it from the beginning. I have taken it over, and we have a small committee. Right now, our committee consists of myself, Debbie, Alicia, and Sarah Burton in our HR department. So with us four, we pretty much think tank and put the program together and figure out ways to make it better. And that was my whole goal this year, to try and increase the number of young people, to make the program better, increase the folks that actually have the jobs to get a wide variety, and also to add a green component to either all of the jobs or provide a green job. And I think we've done that with providing 2 green jobs through the Department of Natural Resources. So,
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz, you had one additional.
Yeah, one additional question. It occurs to me in listening to my colleagues' questions, and also appreciating the fact that we're getting these studies done on the recreation center, and as has been said here, we're going to be thinking about a lot of stuff that has to do with recreation in our struggle to meet demand. And in light of that, I think what I think we need, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in this annual budget presentation. I mean, it might make sense to have it here as well, but we don't have any data on the hard numbers on the participation, the number of people, and how we can categorize them, categorizing participants. In other words, all the users of our recreation program. And part of the problem you identified is that some of the registration work is done through contractors. And I think we need to think about getting those people to provide that data to you so that it can be compiled. So that, because we're trying to do short-term and long-term planning for recreation, and we need to have baselines, and I've never seen anything like that just says, this is the trends, this is the number of people that are using our fields, this is the number of people that are using the rec center on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. These are the age category breakdowns. These are the residents, non-resident usage, and these are the trends. Some are going up, some are stagnant, some are going down, and why, so that we can kind of understand what's happening, what the trends are. And none of that information have I ever seen before. It's not to say you may not have a good bit of it already on hand, but I'd like us to be able to have that information provided to us on an annual basis, so that we it could help us with the budgeting process. But I think more it'll just help us with the planning and seeing trends. So some of the trends might be organic trends. In other words, things that people themselves are voting with their feet and their registration fees, rather than what we think people might want. You see what I'm saying?
yes, yes.
That's just something I think we really desperately need.
I agree, and that is the exact direction that I wanted to go in with some of these metrics, and changing the metrics that we have that's within our budget. So we can get you. We have most of those numbers. We can get the numbers from our contractors for participation, but as far as being really accurate, once they come up under our system and they have to register through our system, we can capture them pretty easily in print reports and come up with metrics that would that we can use to make decisions from, and we can see trends and things of that nature.
I look forward to that.
Okay, I think that takes care of our questions and comments. Thank you very much, and thank you to all your staff who was here as well. And we'll move along to police.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Been 2
We
days.
haven't- we
since-
haven't seen you in a
2
couple
days
days.
since my last confession.
Actually, 3. But that's okay.
Okay, so we're looking at the overall budget for personnel costs. There's an increase of 3.5%, with a total of 3% for the, and if you notice, the FTEs are stagnant at the same rate they were last year. Most of these are personnel expenses, fringe benefits, and other associated costs. And as well as our police retirement, I believe, is rolled into that as well, the increase in payments to the police retirement. The budget also includes money for the pilot program of body-worn cameras for patrol officers. And I just received messages 5 minutes ago that Governor Hogan is planning on signing that one to allow us to use them. Purple line's still up in the air. So, yeah. Okay, a couple of the new programs for 2016. We talked Monday night about the Police Explorer program, and those are for ages 16 to 18. The Police Summer Intern program, which the Rec Department just talked about, which I'm sort of excited to get some young people in there to do the Rec Department. The Safe Cam project is going to be turned on very quickly here, and that's the finishing up touches as well as the sustainment for that program. And of course, the Officer Worn Camera program is also moving forward. Again, the replacement of 7 police vehicles, and that's coming out of the ERR budget. Police equipment miscellaneous is $60,000, and the concept design for the police space, which is just the first phase of the project to determine what it's really going to cost us. We really just have no clue at this point. But that's for the design phase of closing in the atrium, as well as looking at the dispatch area first, and then the rest of the space downstairs. And touch on speed camera real quickly. Revenue is about the same as it was last year, less than 1% difference. Considering the amount of construction and we had snow this year, that's actually probably a good thing, because we did have one camera that probably was affected where the construction zones were at the bottom of New Hampshire at Sligo Creek. Of course, in the next year, we'll probably be losing the camera on, or turning the camera on Carroll off, because there's probably not going to be a whole lot of drive-through traffic. We'll have to wait and see. We may use that camera elsewhere in one of the corridors. And then the expenditures, you'll see the big increase in the expenditure is actually for the sidewalk improvements, ADA work that the city manager talked about last week. And again, personnel costs are up, just again, fringe benefits and associated costs with the 3 staff that work out of the speed camera fund. That's about, the staff costs are about 20% total of the total speed camera fund. Fund expenditures, I already hit those. FTEs remain the same.
I think that's it.
Any questions?
Okay, I got a couple. You're shifting 2 people from CID to operations.
Actually, they were already there. I think we were just correcting it in the budget. We didn't actually move bodies. There's still 3 detectives, and we had some positions from the task force that got moved over as well. So that's why it actually occurred, I think, a year ago, but it was just reflected in this year's budget.
Okay. And it looked to me, when I was looking at page 46, that the wages didn't go up very much at all, but the fringes went up a whole lot more. And as I was tracking that through the various pages, it looked like the fringes went up a lot more for the uniformed officers than for the non-uniformed personnel.
We hired,
Yeah, but that's also the pension.
that's the pension.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, is
Yeah,
that?
I mean,
that's
there
what
were
it-
some associated costs we had to increase too. The more people we hire, the more uniforms, initial purchase we have to buy.
But
it's
that-
mostly
that
the pension.
difference is because of the pension.
Correct.
Which is different for the sworn as opposed to the.
It's huge difference.
Huge difference.
Okay, okay. And just a general observation, it wasn't necessarily as much the case with your budget, but I did want to note that as I looked through the budget, it seemed like employee recognition numbers were minuscule, going down, disappearing. Yours were actually, there was something there, but is that something where people decided in the last year or two that that was a place to just kind of sweep some money, or was that never very high?
You know, it's categorized in strange ways. I think there's 3 different kinds of categories. One that seems to be called out is for when you hit 20 years, you get something. So it's very person-specific. It's 5, 10, 15, 20, there's a certain amount of money that goes as a bonus for that. Then in the non-departmental budget, there's money for just kind of general, some employee appreciation day and those kinds of things. And then the police department has a little bit of its own for its
Right.
police awards.
Right, because there's that award ceremony and
Right,
various
we have
things.
That's right.
the annual award ceremony.
Right. So in general, we're still doing the kinds of recognition that we've done. It's just that the money is split into various places, and it isn't very apparent in the budget.
No, it's
So I wonder
strange.
why we even have that call out of the employee recognition in the budget. Because like in the police department, the actual for FY14 was 2,200, and then it, dropped by 75%, and it's going up a little bit, but it's like, is that even worth calling out?
It's not, because that part is very employee-specific. It's how many people hit 10 years this year.
Might as well bury it somewhere.
I would like to. Okay.
Because it's just something I look at and I go, why is this? But I don't really
I
need to
think
worry about it.
probably because we put a line in for the award ceremony as well, and that it's just a placeholder for us, but it could be put in
But I
other
appreciate the
costs.
comment.
Okay. Other comments? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I know we talked the other night about the SafeCam program. Do you feel you have enough money in your budget to do the community outreach for that once it's up and running? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another question, and you may have answered this in the past.
Unless you're wanting to give me more.
No, I just want to know.
No, I think we're fine.
You think you're fine? Okay, thank you. Another question, you may have touched upon this in prior meetings, but asset forfeiture money, do we get that, and where does that show up in the budget?
There's 2 types. The federal asset forfeiture money, which basically is going to dry up fairly soon, because unless you're actively involved with the federal case and act from the beginning to the end, or at least from the beginning, the local departments aren't going to get it. Now, there's a new attorney general. I don't know how that's going to change one way or the other. As far as asset forfeiture, I saw your question. It looked like regarding the seizure, the federal seizure for the former Tacoma Park resident. The reality is it's a federal seizure, and it has nothing to do with the city police, and we won't see any of that money. Any federal seizure has to go directly into a fund that is used for public safety, law enforcement. We have a little bit more leeway with our local seizures. Most of that goes into the general fund. Sometimes we use it to buy an undercover car or something like that for equipment, but there's not as much money in that.
Thank you.
And they did raise, the legislature did pass a law this year. I don't know if the governor's going to sign it or has signed it. Basically, the minimum that seizure has to be, I think it's up to 300 now instead of 100, and it has to be tied to a case, and which we were doing anyway.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, can you elaborate on the police equipment costs? Is that?
I don't have it broken down here, but I believe that's going to be replacement radios, computers, et cetera. We have about 30 computers, I believe, right now that we have to give back, or 20 that we have to give back to the county because the county had upgraded their system and required that the next version of the computer with Windows 7, our computers were no longer going to be adequate, and they gave us 2 weeks. So they loaned us the computers, but we're going to have to replace those this year so they get their computers back.
Right, in the capital budget, there's $25,000 in field radio equipment and $35,000 in mobile computers.
On average, Chief, how much does it cost for us to hire a new police officer?
Cost of hiring,
Yes, hiring, and once we bring that person on,
well,
How much-
let's take salary out, because if we're talking about cost, it depends on the applicant pool. We've been doing a lot of recruiting. It's actually been minimal cost for us to go outside the area to do the applicant testing. Captain Bowers can probably tell you exactly how much we pay for some of the testing procedures, because we outsource our test manuals, as well as the background polygraph investigation and the physicals. Yeah, a couple $1,000s per candidate probably that get all the way through the system.
because last year, we were having problems, bringing people through the pipeline. Do you think it's more efficient now? Are you finding ways that you're getting better applicants?
I wish we could get more better applicants. There's a comma in there. We had almost 100 applicants, 76, 70, or 80 applicants maybe this last time, and we had 3 that made it through the process that are finalists for one position. Would I like to see 200 or 300 applicants and have 20 or 30 better ones to choose from? Yeah, but
Right.
I don't know that, we're competing with a lot of other agencies right now that are expanding, some of which have better benefits or, better pensions, which, generally the young guys don't think about pensions when they get hired. That's probably the last thing in their mind. But when they look at the total package, then it's like, wow, oh, yeah, I can do this. Montgomery County's got a big hiring push right now. Prince George's County's hiring, and Howard County's hiring. So we're competing against some major departments.
I'd appreciate it if you could keep us informed so that we do remain competitive. Because if Montgomery County is taking a lot of these new recruits and you're only left with a tiny pool, we need to know that and see what things that we can provide that you would have the officers that you need. Finally, the Explorer program, when do you think it's going to start?
Sometime after, obviously, the fiscal year starts, but we're already working towards implementing it. The fees up front are pretty cheap, but then once we get the people on board, we have to buy the equipment and things like that, and that's really what we're looking at.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the program.
Well, they basically take young people 16 to 18. It's affiliated with the Scouts, loosely, but it is affiliated with the Scouting program, and they work details. They work fingerprinting details for community policing type things. They do ride-alongs. They go through some of the training, like the Citizens Academy. They'll go through some of the similar training, and it's sort of a way of us recruiting somebody when they're younger and get them interested in law enforcement, give them a better understanding.
Is there a cost to the kids?
To the kids?
Yes.
If it is, it's minimal.
Okay. And how many kids do you think will be?
I think we were starting with 4 or 6. I'm not sure. It's a small number to begin with. Most of the other agencies in the area have Explorer programs. The larger agencies, I don't know. There aren't too many of the smaller departments that have them, but I think it's a worthwhile project.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chief.
And just to the points you were making about having to compete with the other larger departments, it was interesting to hear the discussion today at the county, at the Government Operations Committee, and it was just kind of passed by without much comment that they're going to be giving 2% COLAs and 3.5% steps. So there's 5.5%, and there's no way we can come anywhere near that.
Well, and then lots of options about retirement
Yes.
stuff that they talked about, yeah.
Yeah, and talking about how within 150 days of being hired, the new employees have to pick their various pension options, and they're locked in forever once they make the pick.
Yeah, the only thing is, I think with the sworn officers, they're still in the police pension plan. I don't think they've changed the pension plan for them. It's the other county employees that, the non-sworn, because, one, frankly, they have the union contracts as well with FOP 35, but they are getting steps. The steps were frozen, before I left, actually right after I left. That's a shame. And they didn't get raises for a year or so, just like here. I mean, times were tough, and they've come out of that. They're trying to get back some of what they did lose, and the new guys are going to be starting off. Our starting salary is very competitive. It's just once you start, you don't catch up very quickly, if at all.
Councilmember Schultz.
What is our starting salary?
Depending on whether they have prior service or not, it's in the area about 54,000, somewhere around there.
Really?
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
It's not bad at all.
No. Better than McDonald's.
Better than the council.
Yeah, that goes without saying, unfortunately.
I was going to say you don't work midnights, but every Monday night.
Can't say that.
You can't say that.
We can fix that.
But Montgomery County starts about the same. Some start a little higher. The big thing about the counties is they have regular steps where in the past, and I believe it's still in their contract, even though they froze the steps, they get an increase every, and it's not pay for performance. They get a step every year through year 15, and then again at year 20 a longevity step. So, and it's 3.5% a year. So if you do the math, it gets up there. It goes up fairly quickly for the younger guys, and that's what the salary study had looked at with us. We want to keep pay for performance, and I think it's a very integral part of what we do. It holds everybody accountable. On the other hand, it was down about 1% a year, maybe 1.5% for a distinguished, which even the consultant said, that's sort of insulting, and that was a quote. So I think we need to improve. That's one of the things we need to improve as far as the benefits. There are other things that we're never going to be able to afford. We don't have the tax base. We get that. We understand we can't give medical free, or pay medical once they retire. Other agencies.
They have OPEB, we don't.
Yeah. And they're self-insured too,
It's
so
not done yet.
they pay for it out of their budget.
Well, when we recruit, we have vacancies, we recruit. Do we have a posture of trying to sell our police department as a
Yes.
good place to work?
Yes.
And what is it that works in terms of making and having
Well,
successful appeal to get a young woman or man to come
Yeah.
to here as opposed to some of the advantages that the other?
Well, I mean, not a lot of the younger officers don't always look at just, it's money, because that money really is not the best incentive. But it's also that we're a full-service agency, that we do everything. So even as a patrol officer, you have the opportunities to do a lot of different things rather than just be tied to a radio and going from one call to another for your entire career. I think that this department shows a lot of pride in that fact that they are independent of other agencies for the majority of what we do. The other thing is that the take-home program is competitive with other agencies, and that actually, you give a guy a car, and it's like they're all excited when they're young. They got a police car to drive to and from work in. So, those are some of the things that are incentives. But we are doing a much better job of going out and promoting the department versus just putting an advertisement in the mail. We go to recruiting fairs. We go to the graduations from some of the other academies, although we are trying to use Montgomery County's academy as often as possible. We just like the product we're getting out of that.
And I guess there's a lot of intangibles part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, the struggle is getting, a diverse group of candidates, and getting everybody through the process when we're competing with these other departments, because they're really recruiting them and signing bonuses, whatever, But, the fact is, we have done, I think, a really good job. Since I've been here in 3 years, I think we've hired about 11 sworn officers. That's, over a quarter of the department. And we're still moving forward with, as we get openings, we're still filling them, so. I'm not going to say what I said the one time about, not going to say about staffing, so.
Okay. The last question I have is, with regard to the Explorer program, is that entirely focused on Tacoma Park
Yes,
residents?
yes,
Okay.
yes. I think a question came up earlier today about our, we have to be careful with the age groups because we are a police department, and sometimes we deal with things that probably are not age appropriate. So under 16 is really, 16 and up is really the age that we focus on. But every year we do, that mini summer police camp. And I just talked to one of the people that have been doing it for years. And one of the issues we've had was that we run it for 5-year-olds to 13, and that's just way too big of an age group range. And, trying to have a 5-year-old sit through police camp is not the same as having, the more attentive kids in that 10 or 11 to 12 range, which is, I think, we're, even up to 13. That's where we want to hit. So if we do it again this summer, we have to, reduce that age range. And again, that's something, through the rec department, but we try to do it for Tacoma Park residents.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, how many officers are we down now?
None?
None?
Well, one.
Okay.
But not all are on the street.
Right, we
No,
still
there's
have
some,
one
right,
that's
I
on administrative leave, and we have one opening because we had 2 retirements, so.
Right, okay. But that's doing pretty good right now.
Yeah, we're in the middle of the process. We've got, I think, 3 candidates right now that have made it through the process, and we're pushing them forward, and hopefully we'll get the next one into an academy class.
We had, in previous years, authorized overhiring to help
Right.
mitigate the problem. How has that worked?
It's worked out well this year, but this year, if you notice, our personnel costs were lower than the budget, and part of that was because we had injured officers that once they're past that 6-month period, their total salary is coming from workers' comp, not from the budget. So we have the salary savings on that end, and so even with an overhire, you're not going to notice it. This year, we probably will do an overhire for this class because, one, we can hire somebody, but that doesn't mean they're going to pass the academy, and it doesn't mean they're going to pass field training.
And so kind of like what's the highest number of officers that we actually were down because of not having them hired and ready?
In the last 6 months, we've been okay.
Okay.
We've actually overhired. I mean, granted, 3 of them were in the academy, so there's 3 that are off the
Right,
that are
right.
on the street. But we've been the last 6 months since we had the discussion last year and changed the ordinance on overhires. We've been in good shape.
Great, glad to hear that. And I just wanted to thank you for doing some speed enforcement on Maple Avenue in front of the schools. Appreciate that. I know it's working because I hear about it.
And
Everybody is not
and
as
so is our new
appreciative.
parking enforcement officer, as we hear about it too. He's out there firing them up. So
Thank you.
I noticed it as I went by the traffic enforcement, and thankfully I was going about 10, 15 miles an hour, so I just smiled and kept on going. Anybody else? Thank you.
thank you.
We have communications.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
keyboard somewhere.
So, but I'm
You're
I'm driving, so you'll have to tell me.
Communications is not in charge.
never have been.
You will have to
We're
communicate.
more of a goalie as opposed to a captain. We brought the whole team. Jenny's here, our newsletter writer, and we all know Alvaro, head of the TV department. And I mean, we're a small shop. We're all one person. We're all one person divisions. So a lot of autonomy, a lot of independent thinking, but we all play nice together. Suzanne's more qualified to talk, and Alvaro are more qualified to talk about the FTEs and the cable franchise fees.
I'll go ahead and just note that the expenditures and cable franchise fee money is about the same. As I talked about in my presentation about the budget, there is an increase in how our kind of assisting city TV staff are categorized that are very part-time, but it adds up to 2.15 FTEs of very miscellaneous time by a number of different staff people. So this is putting those folks in the category very similar to a lot of the recreation part-time staff in how they're counted. They don't receive benefits. The cable operating grant, you'll see that FY15 is listed at $76,290. We did receive, and it will show up in the final CAFR, that the transfer of the funds from where we transferred over cable grant money for some cable operating money for FY15, and so that will show up as a change. This is when the budget was prepared, that this was $76,000. That same amount of about $77,000 is proposed for FY16. There's likely to be some discussion about that with the county over the next 2 months as they've supposedly kind of come to a tentative arrangement with Comcast. I'm fascinated that the Comcast Times Warner deal might be off. Merger. Yeah. So I don't know if that affects the tentative deal that Comcast may have with county. We're supposed to be briefed as staff on that next week, so I will let you know. If indeed what has been talked about in the past comes true, we would have an opportunity to come up with a memorandum of understanding with the county over an increase in the cable operating funds.
We have a lot planned going forward. The big one that I'm working on is we're expecting the redevelopment of the website to be done maybe mid to late July.
Is that like an annual statement?
Hopefully this is a final statement.
No, we're paying for it to be done in July, so it better be done in July. Once we have a good web platform to work with, which I'm excited about, we will kind of retune the communications platforms and how we reach out, including how we reach out to council. That's one of the big things. That's Suzanne has a big Post-it note in her office of all the big initiative, big problems that we want to crack. And one of those is how do we communicate with the council in a meaningful way, and how do we communicate with the residents in a meaningful way. And one of the approaches that I'm going to take, it's going to be data-driven. We're going to look at what works, how it works. We're going to look at the analytics, what people are actually looking at, and make sure the empirical things that we hear are actually what are happening. And then once we see how the website develops, I have a few phase 2 web development projects I'd like to look at.
In CTTV, we're going to buy new equipment. One of the things we're going to do is to buy equipment that will allow us to transmit live from different parts of the city. Like we could go live from like last Saturday, Earth Day. We could transmit from the Cove, from Old Town, or from the Crossroads in the different events. even the festivals and these things that we covered. The other thing that we are trying to tackle is to produce short programs, mainly PSAs, for example, for vote registration and voter registration or composting, things like that, in different language. We want to tackle Amharic first and Spanish because there's like 7% population in the city who speaks those languages. Also, I want to try Mandarin too. I would like to try Mandarin. There's not that much population in Tacoma, but we want to see how it works. So those are two of the main areas. One other thing also we deal also with some location in the building like digital signage. Hopefully we'll get a team together to study how we can expand the digital signage in the building, mainly the library and the auditorium areas. And also one thing is not here is the auditorium, the digital sound in the auditorium.
Yeah, there's a lot of auditorium improvements are proposed.
And the last one is one big thing I'm going to start working with Jenny is we're going to build a workflow once the website gets relaunched. We'll have a lot more blogging tools. We'll just have a lot more tools at our disposal that work. And we're going to start figuring out a way to get newsletter articles posted as individual items. We're not sure where the workflow is going to be yet, but we're working through it. It's something we definitely want to do. And that will, you get a lot of downstream benefits for that. The articles become searchable. You have a working archive. It gives you a reliable set of fresh content every month. And it's something I'm really excited about, and I think it's an overdue. We just haven't had the platform to do it with yet, but I'm really excited to start working with Jenny on that. Now I'm probably pulling my assistant to do kind of the copy-paste work, getting those articles in. And then as far as continued programming go, one thing, we have a great, we're gonna have a great new website coming online. So we need to look at all the content and overhaul it. And that, again, is going to be data-driven. We're going to look at Google Analytics. And there's definitely core content. I'm thinking like the legislative core content, like the stuff Jesse does, that has to be there. But I'm a small shop. I got a lot of work. And we need to look at the analytics and kind of strike where the iron's hot. And I've already started that process of pulling apart the content and looking at critical areas that need to be improved. So on day one of the new website, there's already improved content in place. And then another thing that we need to do just to keep the communication consistent, since we're going to, once the website problems have subsided, I want a style guide, so the stuff that's coming out of the city is more consistent and staff feel more empowered to do things. And just making sure how we communicate with all the people that we talk to, it feels the same. It feels like the city is talking with one voice. And it can be, that can be a challenge when you got different departments, different people, different styles, different priorities. So having a style guide will at least kind of bring a little unity to it.
And just to comment, both on the content and on the style guide, there's been a good amount of work already on that. And we're pushing it pretty hard.
But that work isn't showing up yet.
It's not showing up yet.
Yeah, okay.
In the CTTV, we want to keep collaborating with the Hispanic Chamber of Business. They bring us every semester some interns, mainly from Blair and Wheaton High School. And we train them and then we help us in the production, in editing, and they get an stipend from the chamber. And they work for us, 15 hours a week, approximately. And actually, we have 2 of those pharmacy interns that are now working for us as interns or contractors. where we're thinking, we're putting an emphasis in the programming in the sustainability and lifelong Tacoma programs. Thank you, council members, Stuart, for inviting us tomorrow.
I clean my house.
It's
all clean.
And also we're gonna keep with the traditional programs that we do, the festivals and the parade and the different events that happen in the city, collaborating with Historic Tacoma too.
And with the newsletter, Jane's going to be continuing with all the excellent work she does, coverage of all the wards, and there's definitely been a push of making sure the reporting, I know this has come from Suzanne, is diverse and reflects the lives and stories and experiences of everyone in the city. And that goes straight into the second point, that the newsletter is balanced and has a lot of useful information and features, photography, print, and it's a really nice newsletter. I have not encountered in all my travels another community newsletter that is as nice and balanced as the City of Tacoma Park newsletter. And hands down, from a communication standpoint, it is the most important thing that we do. It goes into every resident's mailbox every month, and my girlfriend lives in Tacoma Overlook, and I know what day newsletter day is because people are reading it in the elevator and they're talking about it. They talk about it in the Nextdoor app. I mean, it's definitely something that has a deep impact on the community, and continued programming of that, I think, is just going to keep reflecting that, and that builds into making residents aware of people on this diocese' strategic goals and enhancing the ability for us to grow our economy and push things like the Georgetown University Energy Prize. And I mean, at the core of it, beyond informing the residents, it's informing our other stakeholders and our visitors what the Tacoma Park story really is, why the Tacoma Park way of doing things is just a little bit better than the way they do things downtown. It's just nicer.
Oh, and that's it.
Questions or comments? Councilmember Grimes.
Thanks. Thank you both, and Ms. Myers for the presentation. I like the newsletter, so I don't really have any comments about it, other than it's great to hear about, I'll call it the disaggregation, whatever you want to call it, getting stuff out separately. City TV, I don't have much to say about. I do want to express one concern, and the police chief has departed, but there is a duplication of communication function in the city, namely that the police public information officer, Kathy Plevy, sends out alerts that often are very often about things that are not just police matters. And in my opinion, the police department could use assistance in their communications efforts. In particular, with regard to the website, I believe that the police alerts are not archived anywhere on the city website. So part of the point here is that the city website, we're not the Huffington Post, we're not BuzzFeed, we're a city, and we need to keep comprehensive archives of public information, especially information that doesn't go out on paper, such as the police alerts. Those, in fact, are retained on an email list external to the city, but I'm sure there are other examples. So I would like to see the website serve as a comprehensive archive for material without regard to departmental boundaries. In other words, get the police department in shape. And once again, I'm sorry that I didn't say this when the chief was here. I am, as you have heard numerous times before, Channel Councilmember Mail, who likes to point out when I repeat myself, concerned about the comprehensiveness of the website. The material that I personally use to do my job as a council member, that means past ordinances and resolutions and minutes and all of that kind of stuff that's not on the website. I'm hoping we'll get caught up, if not with the launch, as soon as possible after that. And that brings up a point. It's good to drive certain things with web analytics, but once again, we're not BuzzFeed. And so we need to have material there and available on the website, well indexed and searchable regardless of the volume of use of that stuff. And so one final point there, stuff that's not on the website is not going to show up in web analytics. You're not going to get hits on something that isn't there. So that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentations. Couple questions. One on page 138, projected city TV hours has gone down from actual 178 of FY14 and estimated 178 of FY15. Why are the number of hours decreasing, or is proposed to decrease?
City TV, mainly, probably, I don't have here.
It's from 178 to 150.
Yeah,
Those are the
I
numbers.
don't have the exact number of programming, but my guess is probably the council hours went down. Probably.
Okay. All right. I like the idea that you're going to do live feeds of events. I mean, you know, if you look at apps like Periscope and Maricat that are out now, I think it's about time that we could do something comparable. It's not very expensive, and then you have things like the live stream. So when do you think that will be up and running for us to do live feeds?
I'm in contact now with the companies that sell the products, and I have to evaluate the type of products because they go through phone lines. So you have to be careful what type of contract you get or what type of deal, basically. So
I think Livestream has one that you can run it through any Wi-Fi device if you or
I've
a
seen
cell phone.
one we're gonna look at.
Okay.
I've seen live chat.
Right.
There is others.
Okay. And then finally, about the newsletter, can you clarify for me, are council members supposed to be in the newsletter? Are we not supposed to be in the newsletter? Because I've tried to do things in the newsletter, and I was told, no, I couldn't do that. But then I read in subsequent newsletters that my colleagues are in the newsletter. So I'm just trying to understand, what is the policy of the newsletter?
Well, we do have a full policy, and I can send you the resolution that kind of identifies all of the guidelines on that. We were actually having some conversation about how do we do this the best way. But let me send you the guidelines, and then maybe we can have a follow-up discussion on that.
I think it kind of boils down to the newsletter staff can ask us, but we can't ask them.
It's a little bit like that, and we have a very interesting newsletter format, which is that it's an independent editor that basically puts the newsletter together, and it can't do things like help promote any one council member, so there's kind of lots of rules about how much might be in about a particular council member, especially as it gets close to election time. So I think, let me send you the guidelines, and then maybe we can have a follow-up discussion, because I think that'd be helpful.
And just let me say, there's a long history to that, and there's a lot of bruises associated with that long history.
We were hearing just a week ago about Sam Abbott's
Yes.
use of the city newsletter, which
Yes.
is interesting.
Which got him in trouble.
And I had a very fascinating discussion also at the dinner, I guess for the 125th, about a previous newsletter editor who refused to put budget information in the newsletter because she found it boring. And and so we have gone through quite a few things that ended up with a series of with a whole set of guidelines, and I'll share that with you. Having said that, whether it's through the newsletter or some other format, I think there's different ways of communicating now than was ever envisioned when the guidelines were done. So it may not be through the newsletter, but there may be some other ways to handle things. Yeah, sure.
Is this on?
You'll be fine.
So there are rules and regulations, but my personal feeling is that, and we can work this through the rules and regulations, but I would like to have an open door as far as news goes. I'm always looking for good news stories, and I'd like you to feel comfortable calling me or emailing me with whatever's going on in your ward if you feel like I'm not covering your ward enough or a particular issue enough. I would love to hear about that. And, we can talk about it, whether or not you get quoted, that's a whole other thing. But because I'm one person, and I've lived in Tacoma Park for a long time, I know a lot of people, but I'm still one person. And so I count on you all to sort of be the ears and eyes and, give me a call if you have things that should be in the newsletter that aren't.
And was that good news stories, or was that good news stories?
We like both.
Both, I would
Both,
say.
okay.
Both, yeah. But it's news, worthy, interesting, important. How about important news stories? Yeah. And actually, I personally love good news stories, but that's just me.
Thanks. Councilmember Schultz.
One question and a comment. Councilmember Grimes raised the query about the differences between the police department's person, Kathy Plevy, and yourself as a person who's designated as the official city contact on media relations. But I've always have been and still remain confused as where is the dotted line that divides your outreach and communication responsibilities from Ms. Plevy's responsibilities, and is it a satisfactory arrangement from your point of view?
For right now, yes. And a lot of the problems that Councilmember Grimes have talked about are purely platform problems. Like, a lot of the reasons that you don't see all of Kathy's stuff on the website, it's just that the website doesn't work very well. And we weren't given our developer didn't give us the tools we needed to keep them going consistently. And once we have that platform launched, a new platform launched, one of the discussions I planned on having was going downstairs with Kathy and working with her is like, what works for you, what works for me, let's sort that out. And if you saw earlier on in the presentation, I was like, we need to revamp the communications platform once we have a website that works. Mm-hmm. Part of that revamping that communications platform is me going to, and it's not just Kathy, it's me going to Kathy, and it's me also going down to the library, who are two kind of quasi, well, they're part of the city, they're departments, but they're very independent, where they have core functions that are well outside the normal functioning of a city government, where they deal with public safety or they deal with customers. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things that I need to figure out how to do, and it's job number one once I get the website launched, is weave that together and figure out ways we can present Kathy's police bulletins in a way where they can be archived and searchable, and we can clearly delineate when I need to step in and give her message a bigger push and vice versa.
If I might, there's also, we have had in the past year and a half or 2 years quite a lot of discussion about kind of defining roles, about who gets out what kind of information, and clarifying that. And so Kathy Plevy is more focused on public safety messages than in the past. And I think that will continue, but we'll have some discussions about it. Having said that, because we're such a small organization, we have to have people learn each other's roles, because anytime somebody is out or there's an emergency or something happens, Kathy needs to step in for Craig steps in for Kathy, other people can step in where they need to. And so we're trying to have regular kind of areas of responsibility, but we're doing as much cross-training as we can, and trying to make that as easy to be done, whether they're in the building or they're at home or whatever, when we need to do it.
Okay. Thank you. I have put in as a reconciliation item the a proposal to expand the city's newsletter by 4 more pages. And I think an estimate has come up that it would run about an additional $17,000 $140 a year, and that's an estimate. I guess my question is that what I think is a good idea may not necessarily seem to you to be a good idea, because it's a lot more column space to fill up, and it takes time, and you want to maintain quality and stuff like that, and I'm just interested in your reaction to that.
You're right. It is more time, but that's part of what we put in that budget number. If that was going to happen, that time is accounted for. I think the most important thing to keep in mind if we do expand the newsletter is that the content has to be good. I think, there's no right length for a city newsletter. I think the 12 pages is really pretty good right now. It's a good mix without getting tired of turning pages. You have some interesting features about your neighbors, and then in the corner your eye catches something about, oh yeah, the trash isn't going to be picked up next Wednesday or whatever. So, it needs that sort of mix. But, as far as length goes, I think 16 pages would be fine. One way to go about it might be to try some 16-pagers sprinkled throughout the year. So we have a 16-pager when we do the budget. We have a 16-pager when we do the voting guide. We've had 16-pagers. We did a shopping guide one year. We were trying to help the commercial district, so that happened once. There was one other we did, I think it had to do with the arts. There was something going on. So there are occasions when we could do that, or when there's a lot of news. Like last month, there was a deluge of news, and I could barely fit it all into the 12 pages. Yeah, we had 12 pages. So, and that happens in the spring. It seems to happen in the spring. So anyway, that's one idea. It could be sort of a pilot, see how it goes. I do want to say something about the content, though, because I know that people recognize the newsletter as a useful and effective vehicle to get your message out to the residents, and that's really what it's about. But I just want to warn against creating this sort of repository of information. Like, okay, everybody has to know X, and if it just becomes a list of stuff that's coming out of City Hall, and I've seen publications like this where it's just like, oh, that thing, and they just throw it in the trash. It needs to be this mix of what feels like news and what feels like features, and then people will read through it, and they'll encounter that list that you really need to have them see. So just something that I always keep in mind in that mix that we talked about earlier. That's really the most important piece to take away from that.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate exactly what you're saying. I've always felt that the newsletter is meant to be a newsletter. It's not meant to be a newspaper, where you get all kinds of stuff in there that's more for entertainment or opinion and we want the newsletter to focus on a lot of information, as much information in as many, in as readable a way and as interesting a way as you can make it. I think that, of course, is always your challenge, because a lot of the stuff that we do up here is not interesting, and we know that. But I do think that...
Speak for yourself.
I just did.
You said we know that.
Well, I'm we.
You're the royal we?
Yeah.
The editorial we call that.
So, but I'm persuaded, though, is that it just seems like there's always more and more stuff happening, more organizations in the city who are doing things, and it's just and the thing about the newsletter is that, like, unlike any other form of communication in the city, it's not ephemeral. It comes to the house. It sits on the dining room table or the coffee table or the bedside table, and people can pick it up a week later, and it's still there. whereas all the stuff we get from all these other sources is just, if you happen to miss it, you don't click on the right email or something like that, or you're just not keeping up with the web page, or you just don't want to keep up with the web page, there's stuff that's going to pass you by completely. So thank you for that. The other thing I just wanted to comment is that I do feel that we need to revisit and spend some time talking about the rules that govern our newsletter. For one thing, the technology has changed, and we have so much technology now. And whereas 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have all this technology, and everybody basically got their news the same way. And that was through the newsletter or neighborhood newsletters or flyers and that sort of thing. And so I think because of people have higher expectations of being informed, and they want to be informed. And since the day I started work on the city council, I've always felt a frustration in my limited abilities to communicate. And I know some of us have private blogs, some of us use Facebook, some of us use Twitter, as well as the email. But a lot of that passes by and never gets to an awful lot of people in this city. The listservs are not heavily subscribed in my ward. And so I feel like I have an ethical responsibility to get information out, so that people at least know what their representative is doing and not doing, and not necessarily my opinions on everything, but just to get the information out. And so that's why I think it's really important that we revisit this and figure out how the newsletter can best help us council members, because we're paid to do a certain job, and the newsletter is the absolutely best vehicle to enable us to carry out so many aspects of our job. That's all I want to say. It's my little sermonette for the night. Thanks.
Councilmember Sermon, Siemens.
Thank you for the invitation to the pulpit. As Ms. Myers knows, I've long had a concern about the newsletter being mistaken for a newspaper, and I continue with that concern as we've talked about it tonight. We hear about people in the elevator, reading about the news, and it's not news. It's a company rag. It's written through the money of the residents of the city, and its purpose is to report on the city and the city government, not to actually report news. However, I will compliment Ms. Myers that I think that she has been very sensitive to that, to my concerns in that regard, and has done quite well since being the editor of the newsletter. And I appreciate that, but I still think there's a risk there, even as you solicit news from council members or from the community. There's still a slant to that news that I think it can be difficult for you as a person that's paid by the organization that you may be reporting news on, that it creates the conflict of interest that can be difficult for you to manage, even with what I see as a high integrity on your part. So I just reiterate that, and I thank you for the progress that we've seen in that area. I still think it's wrong to even the form factor of our newsletter makes it look like a newspaper, and I think it should look more like a newsletter that you would see out of other organizations. But I thank you for the progress that we've made in that area. I also wanted to compliment Alvaro with the changes that I've seen in the cable TV cast since joining this council. It's remarkable where we are today. I mean, we look like a professional organization now with professional quality products, and I appreciate that. And thank you for the growth we've seen. I think there's still some programming opportunities that I know you're working on, and I appreciate that. I'm encouraged that we're working on the website. Discouraged that we're still working on the website. So I look forward to being able to say that we've seen progress there. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I just want to add my thanks to all the work in the presentation tonight. I just have something very small regarding the PSAs in languages other than English. I just went back and looked up the resident survey, and you may want to take a look at that when considering, because I think French is very high. So that was just a point I wanted to make. But thank you for everything.
French is also in our minds. I apologize, Councilmember Smith, because I misunderstood your questions. The reduction in programming is going to be due to, we're going to put more emphasis on PSAs and county news, so they are shorter programs, so that's.
Thank you for clarifying.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Schultz was speaking before about the ability to have other means to get out, blogs and such, and I just point out, by way of providing some information, that I put a lot of work into a weekly update by email, yet of the, and I'm just guessing, 2,900 residents in Ward 2 after 3.5 years, and it's never been higher. Only 13% get that update, and only 7% read it. So the advantage of the web stats is you know how good or bad readership is, how long people spend on pages. And so, it's really hard to get information out. I would urge us to, with the city newsletter, to start using the ability of people to get updates to use that process to also send out the newsletter, and then we'd start getting some electronic stats on newsletter, distribution, newsletter readership, which might be helpful to complement the anecdotal experiences we all have of people reading it, including my children. On the issue of the length of the newsletter, I don't know quite where I stand because I'm pretty happy with the length right now. But to Councilmember Siemens' comment, and I don't know if this is in agreement or opposition, but I guess I've often thought of the advantage of having a page that would be a page for which the content would be reviewed by some sort of editorial board to take some of the pressure off of you, where we would invite essays from residents. And I find op-ed pages to vary in their quality. They can tend to be just places for people to complain as opposed to inform. And I think the newsletter does a wonderful job right now of informing in an interesting way, so I wouldn't want to compromise that. But it's just been in the back of my mind for a while whether we should have a place where, on an ad hoc basis or regularly, a space for people from the public to write long-ish, 500-word, thoughtful, 200 words, I don't know what the right length is, pieces that are about things going on in the city. We're small enough that I think people's opinions are news as well, and we have The Voice, and so I also would be sensitive to affecting the readership of The Voice, but that's just an area of interest, so it doesn't need comment. It's not a budget issue tonight, but just something to think about. Back to the communications budget, I have concerns, and I think I brought these up before to the city manager about the increased number of FTEs. I would note that just with this budget, if it were adopted as is, during the 4 years that I've been on council, Councilmember Grimes has been on the council, the communications budget will have gone up 76%. That's a significant increase. And I note that this budget, and if I can just read the narrative, says FTEs increased by 2.15, reflecting requirements to convert many contractors to part-time staff. no permanent part-time staff are added. And one, I guess I have a concern from a progressive perspective of having staff who don't get benefits, and that has a red flag for me. And then I want to pull up the budget from 2014, which says, for the same budget and communications, department FTEs for full-time staff increased by 2. The ongoing workload of part-time staff has become heavy, necessitating the creation of 2 full-time AV specialist positions. And we compliment ourselves on the quality of our budget and being forward-looking, but those 2 things don't look like things that we were prepared for, that they don't look like either from a finance perspective or from an HR perspective, that we were being thoughtful about how we were employing part-time staff, part-time contractors, I should say, and the consequences of those hires and the programming that was produced with those hires, and how that then played out in the budget process between whenever it started and the FY14 budget and now the FY16 budget. And so I have some real concerns about that outcome, because 76% increase over 4 years is not sustainable. And I don't know. The current budget does not give me any information of whether we still have a set of contractors who are working and whether we won't in 2 years or 3 years be in the exact same place again. I remember, I think it was last year, but it could have been 2 years ago, and I don't think it was myself that led this discussion. People were asking for more information on the budget describes use of staff, but not contractors. And so we don't have a sense of the backload of people backload isn't the right word, but the people we are using to perform city services that don't show up in the FTE column. So again, I just think this is a concern. It's a big expansion of a program that I think is a relatively narrow audience, and I still also don't know for example, with the 2014 benefited full-time employee positions, the benefits, the pension cost of that, and I don't know that we often consider that part either. So I bring that to my colleagues' attention. I don't have a specific comment on it. I mean, I would say not that it makes any difference because it's future council that gets to make the decision, but just being very clear by council that these 2 new positions, and I don't even know if I want to say that because I'm sort of against position, and I know that they're not 2 people, they're an assembly of positions, but in terms of not having benefits for positions, I feel really uncomfortable about that. Whether they're part-time or not, they look like it looks like we're not giving people benefits.
Yeah, on
Thank
that,
you.
though, I do think that I appreciate that, and it is something that I look at really closely. The spirit of the direction from council for years has been that we don't exploit people. We pay benefits for folks who are regular employees, and if they're, we don't hide behind contractors for that. The folks that I actually feel pretty good about the combination that we have now. I don't foresee major changes in the future. I was dismayed. I think I conveyed this to the council that kind of how we were to categorize people 2 years ago was changed as a direction from kind of the direction that we received from HR. I think that we are doing the right thing as it's displayed in the budget. I am very hopeful that you will see very little change in the future. We don't have a situation where we're working somebody many, many hours and just calling it contractor and not giving them benefits. We have a variety of different people. We have many hours, 7 days a week. We have church services. We've got evenings. We've got festivals that take a variety of people that not one particular person could do all of those things. So I think we're in a good combination. I appreciate your concern. I would be hopeful that next year we have very similar information and it not be something that should be as concerning.
I do want to make a remark because I've personally worked as a contractor for many years, and my wife is currently doing that. She had a contract for several months last year with an organization we know, Cheer, to help with fundraising and interim direction, and she was a W-2 contractor, which is what we're talking about here. She was working like 12 hours a week, but she was sort of getting benefits in that the organization paid the employer part of the payroll taxes. If you are a 1099 contractor, then you pay both the employer and the employee part of the payroll taxes. So we actually are doing something better for these people than what they had been getting previously. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a little, I think it's a little, the categories are a little different, but I can share that information, write it up for you and have that available to you.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I think we're doing a good job, frankly, with how we provide the services.
I'm just curious, are these part-time employees, do they typically have other similar jobs elsewhere? Are they students or?
Alvaro, you've got a whole mixture of folks.
It's a variety completely, completely different. Some are recent graduates, some have been with us for several years, some have some experience. We don't get people with a lot of experience. It's people we train sometimes. So
I would like to see if we get more money from the cable operating grant, that we take some of that money and pay these part-time contractors a portion, if not all, of their benefits.
I'll look into that. I mean, it does depend kind of on some union rules and kind of what the options are for them.
But take the newsletter. You Ms.
And
Myers,
that's a completely different situation,
well,
yes.
Is it? You use writers. You use Bob Golden. Do you use Kevin Adler also sometimes? He now is a full-time. Okay, so you pay them on a article-by-article basis, a flat fee?
Word by word. Yeah.
So you pay them on a by-word basis, and they presumably get a 1099 from the city at the end of the year, and they are responsible for paying their own payroll taxes, and they don't get any benefits from the city. So to me, this is the same sort of situation, although the way these people are paid. In the city TV, they're not paid by the hour of video shot or anything like that, or I mean, they are paid by the hour, but they're not paid by the feet. Well, you don't have feet anymore. I'm getting lost here.
No, I mean, every once in a while there are some.
It's standard for contractors who work a relatively small number of hours, under 19 a week, certainly, that threshold to not get benefits in the sense of, what we recognize as benefits. In my opinion, however, if this is maybe one thing you're getting at, to give someone sick leave and paid vacation in proportion to the number of hours that they work is a fair kind of benefit. Is that one of the kinds of things you're thinking about?
It's that, as well as just finding ourselves stumbling into going from 2 to 6 positions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. We're not going there, but.
I'm wondering, because of the recreation department tonight and the communications department tonight, both of those agencies do a lot of this. It would be interesting just to have a snapshot in time, say as of April 30th or March 31st, of how many contractors we don't need to know their names.
The part-time staff.
We have working for the city, whether they're, running the art room for the recreation department, or they are, people that we hire to run the basketball or some of these other programs, or the people that Alvaro uses that show up for special events, and we know their faces, and I try to remember their names, and there may be lots of others, just sort of to get a feel for what we're talking
We can
about.
get you some information like that.
Yeah, and it includes the people part-time who work the desk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a reminder that we do make, we do go the direction that some people are talking about with the crossing guards, where they are part-time, but they basically get full-time benefits.
They used to get full-time benefits.
Do they get any benefit?
Yes. But they have a special provision under the Aspen contract. So, partly we've got, Labor Department rules, we have city rules, when we have union contracts, a variety of things that play into the case, we try to help folks out.
Yeah.
And just a quick comment to Councilmember Schultz's reconciliation item for 12 pages versus 16 pages on the newsletter. It seems like the answer is kind of if there's any reason to institutionalize what you're doing now, which is there are some 12s, there are some 16s, and it kind of depends on the time of the year and the need.
I would say that's about right. I mean, I wouldn't want to go right to 16 pages, really, for every issue. I think it would be a stretch to generate that kind of copy, given the system that we have right now. I would need a little more time to develop sources, I guess. Is that what am I answering your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just say that I would be very comfortable with that approach if we were to incorporate this as a reconciliation item.
And let me just say that what I'll do at this point, as far as the various questions and comments about how we approach the newsletter and whether we should have a discussion on how we do that, what I'm going to do is I've noted that.
It's
but
tentatively on June 1st to discuss the newsletter.
never mind.
That was what I was going to interrupt a few minutes
okay.
ago. There will be an opportunity. We've long wanted to have an opportunity to discuss everything about the newsletter, and so.
Okay, well then I'll finish what I was going to say, which was that if we all get the guidelines in advance, then that would be helpful for that conversation.
I'm going to go ahead and send those out.
Thank you.
And speaking of technology, some of the information on the old guidelines are, you can put stuff on a floppy disk and submit it.
They're old.
So, yeah.
You still could do that.
You can still, I'm not sure what I do with
I
it.
don't think you can. Where would you even buy a floppy disk?
right?
It would be less floppy than it used to be.
Don't go there.
I'm thinking of sticks,
Right.
USB sticks. Okay, thank you on communications. And the final item for this evening is reconciliation. Let me just ask one question of the city manager. If you go to page 18 in your budget, I had a question. Most of the way down through that first section on revenues, it says highway. And I looked at that and I thought, is that highway user revenues or is that something else? And if it's highway user revenues, why is the number down when it should be above the figure for adopted 15 based on actions in Annapolis?
I think it hasn't been, it has not been updated, and I was actually waiting for the new computation, so I haven't gotten that yet from MML.
I had that. I can resend it to you.
Okay.
So that will revise that figure, and so I'll just kind of
Right.
put that, if we add that to the reconciliation list, it's kind of a technical fix. But
Just which line is it? Where is it again?
it's on the, it's
Your
the,
pink there? Okay.
it's the, yeah, where it just says highway, and it says 249,000 as
Got
opposed
it.
to 302 for this year. So I can see that there's going to be at least a 50,000 bump in revenues.
I had a similar question regarding the note that was sent out on the money for Sligo Overlook Park and whether or not, I think it was 175,000 or something.
I tried to send out, I sent out information late today, before the meeting, that identified a number of different kinds of monetary sources, and one of them does have to do with the fact that the city received community park and playground money. We first got a call that we were getting $178,000 for community park and playground monies for Colby Avenue Park. There was some last-minute changes with the legislature that allowed a little bit more money to be available. They called us up and said, gee, how about if we give you $250,000 for Sligo Mill Overlook Park and not give you the $178 for Colby? And we had some discussions back and forth and said, yes, we'll take the more money. What that does is it frees up some additional funds. We were able to use program open space monies that were allocated for Sligo Mill Overlook Park we can use towards the dog park. And it frees up general fund monies. For anytime we're using program open space monies, we have to have a quarter of the cost is paid from general fund. And of course, we had allocated general fund monies for the dog park. So it does give us an opportunity to save some funds. And it saves us $175,000 in general fund money, which is kind of divided between FY15 and FY16 because it was going into the dog park, and it depends on how much we spend in FY15 towards the dog park versus FY16. Nevertheless, it does give us some flexibility, which is very useful.
Okay, so additional items. Councilmember Schultz, was that an old light or a new light?
That's an old light.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple of things that I thought we should discuss as we try to reconcile the budget. One is I want to make sure with the city manager that the money is in the Public Works budget for the
Maple Avenue crosswalks.
Maple Avenue crosswalks, yeah, and I was going to say thermoplast, but more than house paint. Those painted crosswalks, because it's such a high traffic route and it has such high pedestrian traffic, the painted crosswalks don't last long, and we really need one to do. They did them several years ago, and they were supposed to last for the life of the pavement. They haven't.
Or else the pavement disappeared.
If the contractor can't be held to account for that, we still need to.
Right. I'll have to double check on that
them.
to see if that cost is in the current budget or if we need to add something.
I appreciate it, and there are, I think, some other crosswalks that were not done at that time. They should be done now. The whole stretch from Philadelphia Avenue to Sligo Creek Parkway. And then the other thing that I wanted to add to the reconciliation list was to specifically address Councilmember Mayle's suggestion that we explore ways to hold our tax rate constant. And so I would like to add the library planning, construction planning expense, and just delay that and not do that this year.
May I, that was an item I wanted to bring up myself.
Oh, I'll withdraw it then for now.
No, what I wanted to ask about that, well, it's not really a question, it's an expression of a bit of unease that we're going to have a discussion of not just which of the library options we would choose, but whether we'll choose an option.
Correct.
And that discussion won't be until June.
Right.
So, sure, we could put $2,000 or any other sum in the budget for library planning, and then not spend it if we don't go in that direction.
Right.
It just says, I said, this is making me a little bit uneasy that we'd be putting money in for planning when we're not sure what we're going to do or even whether we're going to do anything. Personally, I'd like to do something with the library, but I think I'm going to agree with Councilmember Siemens. I'm not sure starting.
Withdrawing my request. I do want to put that on the reconciliation budget.
I'm not sure about the timing mostly. And we're going to hear from a bunch of library supporters on Monday at the public hearing, and we'll think about it.
I think timing is an issue. It is something that we haven't really thoroughly discussed. We did hear the presentation from the library director and the contractor, but I'm not comfortable at this point that that the proposals that have been put in front of us are adequately addressing the direction that the library needs to go with in the digital age, And that's not to say that we don't need to do something. I think we do. I think it's just timing-wise that we don't have the money this year. And that would be where I would see that we could save some to hold the tax rate. Thank you.
And I'll just say a reminder that as part of the discussion that we had, I guess when the library was here, there was some discussion of the timing of any potential projects, both planning and construction, and how things fit into a timeline going forward of not having two going at once. So that's part of that discussion. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to add 3 things to the reconciliation list. I think we need to focus even more time and effort on youth programs. Councilmember Stewart, Siemens, and myself had a meeting with the kids at Man Up, and there are a lot of issues that are bubbling within our kids, and I think we should spend some resources to try to deal with these things. I would like to see us fund Man Up with their request. I would like us to fund, to some extent, the Youth Collaborative. I haven't come up with that number yet. I would like the Youth Collaborative to be managed and run by Man Up rather than Cheer. Man Up is a youth organization. Cheer does a lot of great work in our community, but they primarily do not work with kids. And finally, this year, Lunch and Learn is going to be tentatively held at the John Nevins School here in the city, and our partner will be Adventist Community Services. So they are supposed to get a grant from the county for $45,000. We're working out the budget to see how much additional money we may need. So it's to be determined. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Great. Well, I think I'm going to follow on what Councilmember Smith just talked about and ask that we add to the reconciliation list money for an outside consultant to come in and help us look at what we're doing well in the city, what lessons we can learn from other communities regarding police and community engagement of the police with youth in our community. I think the police department, in partnership with recreation and other things, are, they're putting in place some great programs like we heard tonight, the Twilight program, the Explorers. But I have to say, after spending an evening with, I think there was probably about 20 to 25 young people in the Man Up program.
And let me just say, they were asking a lot of questions.
But
they were asking a lot of questions. They were engaged.
Yeah, they were very engaged. It was very disheartening to hear them talk about how they feel living in this community. And I'll just say how disillusioned they feel and interacting with our police department. And I know we're going to have this conversation in more depth in June, and I very much appreciate that. But given that this is budget time, I wanted to also pass out, Councilmember Smith had given us, had emailed the President's interim report, the Task Force on 21st Century Policing. And I just pulled out Pillar 4, which was specifically on community policing and crime reduction. And what this chapter really emphasized was the need to very proactively think about community policing. And in particular, there were just a couple of things I wanted to highlight. In the report, it talks about the need to stress that the absence of crime is not the final goal of law enforcement. Rather, it is the promotion and protection of public safety while respecting the dignity and rights of all. And public safety and well-being cannot be attained without communities' belief that their well-being is at the heart of all law enforcement activities. There's also a great deal of research by the Vera Institute that shows particularly when young people have interactions with the police that are not positive, that has a lasting impact on the young person and on the community. I do want to stress, because I think I had this interaction with a resident this week who said to me they were very surprised that I was raising this issue in front of council, given that I was for license plate readers. They felt that you had to be on one side of this. Either you were going to be for police doing things, or you were for protecting the rights and standing up for young people in our community. I don't think there are sides here. I think we're all on the same side. I think we're on the side of protecting people who live in this community and respecting the rights of all our members of this community. I think this is a complex issue. Myself, where I live, my home is 1 block in each direction from where 2 carjackings happened in our neighborhoods. I drive home, when I come home from council meetings at 10, 11 o'clock at night, I drive by where one of my neighbors had a gun in her face. I also sat in a meeting with young people in our community who said they feel very disrespected and not trusting of members of our community. So this is a complex issue. There's no right or wrong, and I think everyone is really trying. So what I'd like to do is have someone who's an expert in this, who's objective, say, here are the things we're doing really well, because I do think we're doing some things very well, and here are some things that other communities are trying that we could try here to improve even more. I unfortunately did not have the opportunity to get a budget item.
I was wondering.
I know, I'm sorry. I tried calling and getting
That's fine.
some information,
the
but
thing that is very helpful this evening is if there's some things that we can investigate before Monday, because I would like to be able to wrap things up on Monday.
yes. So I have some contacts, and I've put out some requests to get us some round figures. Thank you.
And I'll just second that it would be very helpful, since we're doing budget, to have numbers to put in with these requests, all of them, so that we can make some decisions. The decisions may be fairly general in nature with placeholders. We've already had some of those, including some ways in which numbers were placeholders in the proposed budget for something to deal with economic development.
Right.
And the kind of the placeholder for the library, given that some other things have to take place.
Given the importance of the suggestion that Ms. Stewart just made, I'm sure that we can come up with a number by then.
And I'm referring to more than just that one, but other ones as well, because we have a bunch of them tonight without dollar figures on them. Councilmember Grimes.
Thanks. So I'm actually going to pick up on one thing you said, the money for economic development. I'm definitely for that, and I had asked the city manager to revise the wording of the item on the reconciliation list. I have no question in my own mind that I want to spend money on economic development, focusing on Tacoma Langley Crossroads and the new Ave in the next fiscal year. The question is the form of spending we should do. Probably not a staff position, but as the city manager has said, a lot of that decision will depend in large part on who gets hired as a deputy city manager. So I don't know whether it should be a placeholder in here after all, but I just know that I don't think a position is the way to do it. So another placeholder, I'm switching topics, another placeholder here we discussed already is the police space design. I had questioned why the figures in the capital budget changed so drastically, huge change between last year's budget and this year's. I would really like to get much better idea of the numbers, much tighter estimate there, rather than the $2.5 million that's in here right now for FY18. But part of that is to evaluate two different pieces of work that seem to be getting bundled together. There is the atrium cover over, which I know that Councilmember Siemens has advocated, but I'm not sure that I would want to do it because while it adds functional space here, I'm not sure it adds much to our quality of life or quality of city government or anything like that. And that's separate from the police workspace, which does seem to be much more needed and urgent than the atrium cover over. So I would ask you to produce for Monday better numbers for the police space work, separating out the atrium from the operating space. And that would go into the decision about whether to spend $60,000 or some other figure in FY16 on the concept design. Regarding a police-related issue as well, I'm not in favor of cutting taxes, even if we do cut spending from the FY16 budget. For this reason, I came very late to a real understanding of our city police pension liability, the implications of it. And what I said this last week, I'm going to repeat myself, what really made me see it in a new light is the arguments that when we take bond funding to do capital projects, that the people who use those capital, the product of the capital projects, building whatever, are the ones who pay for it because we pay the bond over time. The fact is that we have over $10 million in police pension liability for services that were delivered in the past. And arguably, the sooner we pay it off, the more the people who benefited from those services will actually be paying for it. Someone who moved to Tacoma Park, 22-year amortization. Someone who moves to Tacoma Park in 15 years is going to be paying for something that person never benefited from. Someone who moves tomorrow to Tacoma Park, to Heather Mazier's house, will be paying for something that person never benefited from. So I would, adding 2 cents to the tax rate is not a huge pain, and I would maintain that even if we cut spending on other programs in order to put the money into police pensions. So I would add a specific further police pension discussion to the reconciliation list. And finally, I used the word unease about something else earlier, and I'm going to use it again, which is the youth collaborative. And it's a little difficult to say this sitting here in public on video and all of that, but we have dedicated community members who are devising programs that will essentially employ themselves. And that makes me somewhat uncomfortable. Councilmember Stewart talked about getting in some kind of expertise to, I'm going to paraphrase here, look at the problems that the city has and recommend solutions. That would be objective evaluation of needs here. And the Youth Collaborative is not doing an objective job of evaluating our needs. So that's personal opinion. It's not to say that we couldn't end up at a situation where we would fund beyond the immediate grants that we're talking about, organizations such as Man Up and Cheer. I am comfortable with that level of spending, but the much higher level of spending involved with funding the Youth Collaborative, I would want to have some kind of objective evaluation from an outsider before we commit to that. Thanks.
May I make a follow-up clarification?
Clarification.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes mentioned the covering of the atrium between the community level and the police level, and I had made that suggestion not only to provide additional community space on this floor, but to be able to provide better service from the police department because of the noise problems they have from this floor that floats down through that open hole, and also to provide the additional space that the police need in their department.
So my request again, I'm not saying no to that. I'm saying separately price them. Yeah, separately price them.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, to add 2 sentences, if it really is needed to cover that space in order to create additional functional space for the police, then that puts it in a different light.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you, Mayor. I mentioned before one statistic of my time on council. I use that time period because it's actually what's in the budget, the 2012 numbers through today. And I just describe a few other numbers. The police budget has gone up 19% in my time on council. The public works budget, 27%. The housing budget, 52%. The rec budget, 50%. The communications budget, 76%. And so if I look at my time on the council, I think to Councilmember Stewart's point, I can say that we have for 4 years put a disproportionate effort into rec department programs. Many of those are programs that benefit youth. But those numbers also trouble me because, and I'm thinking particularly of Vanita, who many of you know, who reached out to me at some point saying, I'd like to be able to afford a single-family house in Tacoma Park. I don't want to live in an apartment building my whole life. And when we make the property tax rate go up, or when everyone's homes are appraised at a higher value and we don't lower the rate, we make it harder for Tacoma Park to hold on to lower income residents. It gets harder every year. And so to me, that 2 mill rate change in property tax is about holding on to something we talk about as a real fundamental bedrock principle of who we are. And I'd rather hold on to people who can live here than provide recreation programs for them or try to use a Band-Aid to make their lives better after making it more difficult for them to afford housing. So for me, looking at the numbers of what we've done, we've been going in the right direction of what we've tried to emphasize in the budget for the past 4 years, and I challenge all my colleagues to look at their tenures on council, whether it's 2 or 20 years, and look at the change in program budgets across that period to see what their legacy is, essentially, in terms of the emphasis of programs in the budget. But from my perspective, we should be doing one of the most important thing we are doing with this budget that is different from previous budgets is doing right by city staff. And so that means we have to make sacrifices in other places to be able to do that. So from my perspective, another thing I'm not willing to sacrifice is pushing more lower income residents out of the community. So I'm trying to find ways to keep the tax rate at the current rate, not to cut it, but to keep it at the current rate. So there's a number of items on the reconciliation list that I won't repeat because they're already there. I think Councilmember Siemens put the library space on the reconciliation list, so I think that's on there. I would put the police space on, just to clarify that Councilmember Grimes is asking for them to be separated, but.
I'm asking for it to be on and
Great.
separated.
Okay.
And with better numbers supporting the better estimate numbers.
I would put the economic development position on that list as well, or the money. I'm not sure how it's described in the budget right now, but I think it's as a position. I would urge my colleagues who want to make expansions in some of the program areas that have been described to also provide cuts. What's the alternative? What's the offset? My personal proposal would be two things. One, to ask city staff to identify another $50,000 in reductions somewhere without losing a position in the police department budget.
I'm sorry, you want 50,000 out of the police department budget?
Mm-hmm. And the other option, and this doesn't quite fit the mayor's request for items, but is to say we've approached our CAFR audit in a very formulaic way. We get the audit. The audit shows, I think, every year of all the budgets that are available online, an average of $2 million less spending and more revenue than we had projected in the budget year. Some years it's more than $5 million. So I would suggest that the things we want to spend more money on, or the things we want to spend a tax increase on, we wait just a few more months. And the way we've traditionally approached our budget amendments is to make them, they're not council-driven. More money comes in because, they're council-driven in the sense that sometimes it's grants. Councils ask staff to focus on grants. But to really have a council process after that CAFR comes in, and if we find that we have $2 million more than we expected, or $1 million or $500,000 more, to use that as a moment to reconsider the budget, to have our own mini budget process based on the CAFR and say, okay, great, now we've got money for the youth collaborative, or now we've got money for this library study or the police space study. But to use that moment to say, well, if we end up with extra money that we didn't expect come the audit, then let's have those discussions now, but let's not raise the tax rate now. Let's wait till we get to that point for the CAFR. So I think I just suggested 2 additions to that list that you've got. I saw the city manager writing those down. But just from a matter of principle, I would suggest this new step in our process where we think about the CAFR process as a conscious moment to amend the budget if we end up with more money in our general fund than we had expected.
If I can address that, that has been something that has been done many times, many years. There's an opportunity somewhere around January to see where do we stand on a variety of items and make some decisions. You can't change the tax rate at that point. Mm-hmm. So this is the only time to set the tax rate.
Right, but I would agree that there has been the process many years to kind of say, okay, and it's been tied in many ways to the unappropriated reserves, to trying to hold off until mid-year to kind of see where things have shaken out, what the potential needs are, and then have that discussion either before going on break in December or after coming back in January to reevaluate. Councilmember Schultz.
Couple comments first. I think one of the reasons that we need to increase the tax rate by 2 cents approximately is that I think we have to protect the general fund, because the general fund is our basic checking account that we use to cash flow the city. Come whatever may, we don't know. We're trying to predict here in April for stuff that's going to be happening starting in July for the 12 months after that, and that's always a precarious process. And we know that given the current budget, that the general fund is getting down, was projected to get down to a low level that's about as low as we can comfortably live with, and I'm just a little nervous about that. And I'm inclined to concur with Councilmember Grimes, is that the police pension is something that we have to pay some attention to. I think all of us are pretty much on the same page that first things first is getting our staff salaries correct into proper order, which is going to take at least 2 years. And who knows if 2 years from now we'll still be caught up if Montgomery County is being as generous as they are and everybody else is trying to keep up with everybody else. It's a moving target. I think two things I want to focus on. Economic development, it's the first one. If we're going to get serious about economic development, just as we said some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we wanted to get serious about doing sustainability based on the task force on environmental quality, whatever it was called. Environmental action, thank you. And we realized then, the recommendation was that in order to do that, we had to have a person devoted to sustainability. Took us some time to get there. We have that person, and that person is lighting a fire under sustainability and moving things forward very quickly. And the same goes with economic development, is that we can talk about all the opportunities, but frankly, we've got to have that expertise in-house. There's only so much you can do with consultants. Fine, we can hire consultants as we may need them. But we have, economic development is a complex task that is partly proactive and partly reactive as we deal with opportunities that come along that we didn't. I mean, they may be setbacks, but they can also be very well likely to be opportunities that we didn't foresee, and we need to do something. We need to have staff capacity, which we lack right now, in order to be reactive. When we were in the depths of the recession and the real estate, banks weren't lending to commercial real estate or anything, that wasn't the situation. But as the economy continues to prosper, things are going to happen. Regardless of whether the Purple Line gets funded as we hope, or it gets maybe further delayed, this is still going to be a process. So however we do it, whether it is the kind of deputy city manager that ends up getting hired who brings those capacities with her or him, or it's a different person at a lower level. I don't really care. We have to have that capacity. So it needs to be in the budget. But just where, I don't know, and what it's going to, what number it would be, I don't know either. The second thing is that I understand the concerns about the needs to address the needs of youth in the city, and I've heard that, and I appreciate Councilmember Stewart's concerns and opinions and ideas on this. As well as Councilmember Smith's, who's already done a lot of work in this area, and I'm happy to support that. But I think that another issue that we tend to not talk about is the condition of housing in our city. I'm talking about high-rise housing. I'm talking about regular houses, if you want, for lack of a more sophisticated word, is that we've got chronic problems in this city that we lack the tools to do anything about. We have a very capable code enforcement staff who I'm proud of and I think do a very good job of citing things. But the problems that we have in this city are way, way too complicated to be addressed by either the stick of code enforcement or the carrot of our emergency repair program for low-income people, which is really a very, very insignificant activity in relative to the problems that we face. In January, I distributed to everybody here on the council and to staff my proposal for the Tacoma Park Neighborhood Investment Corporation, which would be a public-private partnership that would take over the responsibility of getting these chronically debilitated houses back into the mainstream of our housing. It is a big bite to chew off. It's an innovative idea, perhaps unprecedented. I've gotten some feedback from some people, but very little. It's clear to me that if I'm going to get something like that to move forward, that some interim steps need to be, and this is what I'm coming to in terms of a reconciliation item, is that I'd like to be able to set up some sort of colloquy during this coming year where we bring together the people in the city who are concerned about this, including our staff, who deal with it every day, including the people in our city clerk, city attorney's office, who have to enforce the property code, property maintenance code, but all the other people that have to deal with the social issues and the health issues that are associated with people who live in these properties and the people that own these properties that are so badly deteriorated and chronically persistent that they never get fixed, and there's nothing that the city can do. We need to bring together a bunch of people who bring and look at what I'm proposing and criticize it and come up with something that will work. I'm not wedded to what I've drafted, but there needs to be a discussion, and this, we cannot just continue to sort of shrug our shoulders year after year and just say, gosh, we need to do something about chronically bad housing that we have in the city. That seems to defy solutions. It's a very complicated problem. It's just as equally complicated as trying to figure out solutions to to helping the young people in our city. It's going to require a lot of things, and I tried to prepare a project that would comprehensively address it, but it's not something I can expect the city council to say, oh gosh, this is a great idea, let's just implement it. It's way too complicated to do that. But that's what I'd like to be able to do, is to start to pull together a group of people, not a task force, not a committee, not a commission, but just to be able to start a dialogue of all the people in the city who have expertise and concerns about it, so we can talk about solutions.
Mayor, can I just quickly, just one?
On his point?
No, just on
Well-
Councilmember Mayo's point.
Hang on.
Okay.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I just wanted to make one clarifying point that when I talk about the programs for youth, I'm distinguishing that from the excellent job our rec department does right now. I think our rec department does a terrific job providing recreational services to the young people as well as other members of our community. Where I think we need, and there needs to be more investment, one is to look at what our police department and how their relationship is with young people. That's one bucket of things, which is, again, in addition to what they're doing with the rec department, which I think is a great idea and moves us along, but there are a lot of other things that we need to be doing. In addition, I would urge my colleagues to read what I handed out, and then also to understand also what Man Up does in our community. Again, Man Up is here in the rec department as a space. It is not a sort of a traditional rec program that we're talking about. It is about mentoring, peer education, and helping young people in our community address their needs, whether that be helping them prepare for school, dealing with issues at home, other things in the community, or frankly, dealing with what's going on in our country right now and what it feels like to be a young person, particularly a young man of color. And so I would just urge us to, when we are thinking about these things, to remember that these are programs that I think I'm talking about and Councilmember Smith has put forward that is very much in addition to and different than what the rec department does. And that is not to take anything away from our rec department, which I think does a very good job.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to rise to the challenge that Councilmember Mayo threw out. You said, well, don't just add money or add items to the reconciliation list that is just going to be more spending, add some cuts. And so I came up with a few things. I would not support the management FTE. That's $175,000. I would not support the library design. That's $200,000. And I will not support the boundary survey. So we're looking at a total of $425,000 just in the last 15 minutes.
Except they were all already on the list.
Yes, but I'm just saying that I support them also.
Okay. The lobbying has been heavy up here this evening.
And on Councilmember Stewart's points, the proposals that I've made are about prevention. If the police department in the email that the chief sent all of us is, if you look at the numbers, around 25% of the crime that happens in our city comes from local people. We need to do something to bring that number down. And the best way to do it is to start with the kids. And I just don't think that the programs that are offered have enough resources to really make a dent in that number.
I just want to make an observation or two about the discussion tonight and through this budget process. We've talked for years about needing to expand the time that we spend on the budget and how we go about the budget process. We have kind of started earlier. We started with a number of discussions at the end of last calendar year. We have expanded how we talk about priorities, and I think we have spent a good deal of time putting in some hard work and some good efforts on trying to lay some things out and give some parameters that we all talk about to begin the budget process. We always have the desire to add more things that we do. We have the countervailing desire to make sure that we don't price people out of our community. I just feel like I have to comment that we are a community of about 17,000 people, and we're trying to do more and more and more, and it's harder to come up with the ways to pay for it all. We have tried to use other people's money, and we have been pretty successful at that for many years. And the type of discussion we're having at the last part of this evening's meeting is just emblematic of the difficulty that we have in trying to address all of the needs that we see in our community and find ways to pay for them. And I know it makes it very difficult for the city manager and staff to have all of the reconciliation items kind of backloaded in the process and trying to come up with the information and the figures to give us something we can work with on Monday night. I think it's going to be not the easiest conversation to have as we sort through these things. And I'll just say that personally, it reminds me how I usually label myself a social liberal and a fiscal conservative, and I'm feeling very fiscally conservative in this crowd. And so I haven't made my mind up on what combination of things will be the best outcome for the city going forward in FY16, but I look forward to that conversation on Monday night.
I think deadlines are very helpful in getting anything done, any project we're on. But I would also call your attention to the fact that the Monday night deadline is not
It's not
fixed,
hard.
it's
No,
not a hard
I
fixed
agree.
deadline. We have some flexibility there.
We do, but I think we have about 2 hours scheduled for that discussion.
We'll be able to use that.
And since we've already had a half an hour's worth of that discussion, maybe we can get some things done on Monday night. Any other reconciliation items to add to the list? No lobbying requests, just items to add to the list.
I think that's it. They have to be
Okay.
explained.
And then reacted to, and then brought up again. Okay, we are adjourned.